Good afternoon, QChurch, and welcome to our house. This afternoon, we are here together as a community on a quest for a refreshed perspective on life. Now, a big welcome back to Anth and Chris, who have been continuing our ongoing quest in Salt Lake City. On Wednesday night this week, we will be back together for IQ here in the main hall, where Anth will be sharing his thoughts and helping us develop a more intelligent faith. Doors will open at 7:15 p.m. for a 7:30 start. Entry is free and everyone's welcome. As you came in this afternoon, you may have noticed posters and flyers for our Christmas at Our House celebration on Sunday, the 22nd of December. Now, these are always great nights, and it would be fantastic to share this experience with as many people as possible. So please take home just 2 flyers this week and invite people to come along with you on the 22nd, because it will be an unforgettable, heartwarming night of story and song. If you're a guest with us this afternoon, then welcome to Q. On the pew in front of you, you'll find Welcome to Our House cards, which are there to help us get to know each other. So feel free to fill one in and hand it to a steward. Now, everything that we do here at Q can only happen because of the lovely, generous people all around you. And the easiest way to support Q and all we're doing here together as a community is to hit the donate button at qyork.co.uk. If you'd like to make a cash or a cheque donation today instead, then you can just use the black and white envelopes that are in front of you, and we'll take a collection later on this afternoon. After the final song this afternoon, there'll be drinks and snacks served in the foyer, and we'll have half an hour to relax and chat over a cuppa, whilst our 5 to 11-year-olds have 30 minutes of fun and games in Life Zone. Now, over recent weeks, we've taken a journey from the past, exploring our memories and how we can remember well, to an exploration of inspiration and how we can inspire others. This afternoon, we're continuing our journey together to ask, how can we move from inspiration to action as we set off on a quest for stepping up?
Gave me courage to believe that but by the grace of God. If not for your goodness, if not for your grace, I don't know where I would be today. If not for your kindness, I'll never say I'm still standing. If not for your mercy, not for your love, I most likely would have given up. If not for your favor, I never would say I'm still standing. I'm still standing, but by the grace of God.
Hello. I hope you enjoyed that. It was a bit of an exciting start because we want to encourage everyone that when we talk about stepping up to the plate, that we're not asking you to do something that we hope you're going to fail at. We want you at the end to have that victory experience at the end because we know that it is this kind of stuff that you're all made of. We have been told that we're not, and experiences have dealt us some blows that make us feel that we're not able or not skilled enough, but actually deep down we are. And I hope that's encouraged you. It's lovely to be back, and I want to thank the team for carrying the load while we've been away. I've loved what I've seen, I've enjoyed it, and we only ever want to build on what's gone before. So tonight we really felt that we could build on this whole idea of inspiration. And you know, what was said this last few weeks is to inspire means to be breathed into by listening to the stories of others, connecting with other people, and encouraging us to step up and take control or responsibility, what we become in life. Now, I know some of you, even this week, have had to face things that you have not wanted to face at all. We're really sad with Jean over the loss of a great-grandson. No, it's your grandson, sorry, your grandson. And, you know, there's Claire's granddad who's had to go into hospital. There's various things that are happening that you can't take this away. It's happening. But what we do believe that we can be empowered to step up and face it with a power that there are those who might not have that. And we want to encourage you that it's there for you. So I am someone who's quite easily inspired. I can look at a gnarled tree that's, you know, just rugged in the forest, and I go into sort of ecstasy over this tree, and people think I'm quite stupid, but I really do get excited. And I once told you the story that I picked up something off the ground that I thought was a gnarled piece of wood, and it was actually a piece of dog muck, and I've told you that before, but that gives you insight into how I can be actually quite pleased at things that I think, you know, that looks interesting, you know, and later I find out, you know, it wasn't what I thought it was. But anyway, this week I have been inspired by two stories. I've been inspired by more than that, but two particular stories that just came up on my Facebook post. And one was a story about a guy called Viktor Frankl, and he was actually a survivor of the Auschwitz concentration camp. And another story was of Gary Rhodes, the celebrity chef who sadly died on Tuesday this week. Now, they seem to be pulled apart in the type of story they are, but actually there is a common denominator, and it seems to be adversity. Viktor Frankl, he realized that in order to survive the concentration camp, one had to have what he called an inner hold. Because if a person didn't have it, they actually could be dead within a couple of days. Now you think, that's horrendous, isn't it? But the terrible ordeal that people had to face, if there wasn't something inside them that held them, they were very short-lived. And this inner hold that Frankl was talking about was the why of life. And it's interesting that he quoted a powerful phrase that I think it's pronounced Nietzsche once said, the philosopher. He said, "He who has a why can bear almost any how." Now that's a powerful thing. If you have a why in your life, you can bear almost any how. And he recognized that those who lived to help others with an idea in their minds how they would affect the future, they were the ones that survived. And he said, every man everywhere is confronted with fate, with the chance of achieving something through his own suffering. That's quite powerful, isn't it? Now, there's the challenge, because none of us want to suffer. And I agree, I wouldn't choose it. But it's whether during that suffering that we're confronted with, he said we could turn our tragedies into triumphs. Now, I like the sound of that. And that's what he's talking about, this inner hold. What a guy. In reality, I don't think that I can comprehend the sort of suffering that went on in the Holocaust. When you look at the pictures, it's particularly daunting, and we wouldn't wish that on anybody. Now, Gary Rhodes, on the other hand, and that's why I say it's a bit of a weird contrasting story. It is said that his future was sealed at 6 years old when his dad ran off with the neighbour, and he stepped up to feed the family. That's quite a heading of a newspaper article. And it says this: his mum, being left with nothing, had to work long hours to pay the bills. But instead of wailing about the unfairness of life, Gary stepped up to be the man of the house for his mum and his 3 other siblings. He not only picked his brother and sister up from school, but he put aside his desire to be a policeman or a racing driver and became the family cook. By 13, he had perfected the Sunday roast with lemon sponge pudding for afters. Now, that seems such a contrasting story to talking about Viktor Frankl. But what you've got in common there was the fact that they had to step up in a situation. So this 6 Michelin star chef, author of 20 books and an OBE, only wanted to be remembered by the words, he could cook. Isn't that lovely? And in his own words, he felt he had done all right in life. But how did this come about? With my father gone, it made me so much stronger. When I look back, I realize I had quite a responsible head on young shoulders. So while his mates were off playing football in the park or bunking off school, he was busy keeping house and embracing all the extra jobs his mum asked him to do. When his mum, going out to work, told him to turn on the washing machine, he made sure that when she came home, it was not only washed, but it was sorted and folded. He said, I wanted to impress and do more than was expected. This became his philosophy for life, and to this day, his work ethic and self-control were legendary. So this is the question tonight. Are we only inspired or feel able to step up when we are faced with adversity? Does adversity create the why for our survival? It could be said that without adversity, we are not motivated to do more than is expected. Hardships seem to have the potential to drive us the way freedom and ease does not. Maybe that is why religion became so powerful. It became, it created the hardship that was missing, the angry God that had to be pleased, which forced us all to step up. Can we get to a place where we are driven by love to go beyond what is expected, or do we insist on adversity? Can we step up without a crisis being the driving force? Viktor Frankl said it didn't really matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expected from us. Now that is profound. The question is, what do any of us think that life actually expects of us? And we have a great expectation of what life should be delivering for us. So recently I've been watching the third season of The Crown. I don't know whether any of you have watched the other two seasons, but Queen Elizabeth in one scene is talking about the fact that she was never meant to be queen. But because of a series of events, this was now her duty to outwork. And sometimes we find ourselves in situations that we did not ask for, and many times we feel resentment because of it. In this next clip, taken from the film The King's Speech, we go a little further back in the royal story. We see someone, Prince George, who is actually Elizabeth's father, who through no desire of his own is called to step up to a role he had not envisaged or been trained for, and was sadly without the skill that was required. Prince Edward had, whether rightly or wrongly, abdicated his responsibility, leaving his brother George, who had a speech difficulty, having to step up into a role that demanded speech. The engagement of a speech therapist to help him in his plight is interesting, as they come to the understanding that neither of them are qualified for the roles required, but rather than focusing on what they couldn't do, they'd each step up to help achieve the goals required. Tonight, we can all find that inner hold that Viktor Frankl talked about. It's an attitude that motivates us to step up to the plate in whatever circumstances we find ourselves in, because we are not only living from the concept of what we expect from life, but from what life expects from us.
When night has fallen, when fear is common, still you're calling me. When faith is lost and my hope exhausted, you will be my strength. When my mind says I'm not good enough, God, you're enough for me. I've decided I'm not giving up. You won't give up on me. You won't give up on me. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking down like an echo. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking down like an echo in my soul. In every season, you keep repeating promises to me. Now there's no stopping what you have started until it is complete. When my mind says I'm not good enough, God, you're enough for me. I decided I'm not giving up. She won't give up on me. You won't give up on me. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking up like an echo. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo in my soul. When my mind says I'm not good enough, God, you're enough for me. I've decided I'm not giving up. 'Cause you won't give up on me. You won't give up on me. Your love is holding out and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out, breaking out. Your love is holding on and it won't let go.
Yeah, it seems with the Salt Lake thing, every time we think we might be done and ready to pull out, that something that one cannot deny is divinely, ridiculously, connectively inspired occurs. So we carry on. So we'll keep you updated as we can. Been a strange period, you know. I thought we'd been back longer than Wednesday. We got back on Wednesday. I was convinced we'd been back for a couple of weeks. I think that's because of so much that's been happening that I think actually ties in a little bit to tonight. You know, as we went away, we buried dear old Barbara Bradley the day that I went across to Leeds to fly out. And, you know, then, of course, we come back to Claire's granddad, Jim, who, you know, has got a pretty serious cancer. And, you know, love and prayers are with you guys for the difficulty. And then dear Jean Potter there, whose grandson Simon sadly passed away from the cancer that he's been suffering from down in Rugby. And then we just had Connie had some pretty serious surgery before we left, and also had Riley had some surgery on Wednesday. And then, of course, there's the London Bridge attack where these two people sadly lost their lives to the crazy guy with the knife, and you know, other people injured. And then, you know, you put on that things like Chris said, you know, the passing of Gary Rhodes, which you might not think, how does that affect us? But these are all things that when you tie them together, that there's a little string that goes through them. Also this week, you know, somebody Chris and I used to watch every New Year's Eve, which is Clive James, the Australian broadcaster who lived here for many years, also died. And I'll make a quote from him later. Now, Chris read the write-up of Gary Rhodes, and how, you know, what started his journey was, you know, as a 6-year-old when his dad just walked out and him and his family were left alone. And you heard that wonderful thing how, and it's happened with other families, how at 13 years old he was taking his siblings to school and bringing them home and cooking dinner for them. And what he said at the end of that, you know, I wanted to impress and do more than expected. And I think, you know, for us, the whole idea of stepping up is the idea of doing more than expected. But there are a few problems with that, particularly in the kind of church that we are and the kind of belief system that we have, which I'll run into as we go through the night. Because what do we really mean by stepping up? When we say stepping up, what do we mean by stepping up? And when is stepping up actually stepping up? Or when is it a push rather than a step? You know, the reason we are, quote, stepping up actually is not to do with stepping up at all. It's to do with the pressures of life that have pushed us into a situation that maybe we didn't want or we didn't like, but we find ourselves there. You know, just like, you know, with Gary Rhodes, his father walked out. There was a push there. With Viktor Frankl, who Chris mentioned, he was surviving a concentration camp. There's a bit of a push there when you've got to survive a concentration camp. You know, King George VI, who was on the video there, was forced to be king. Didn't want to be king, should not have been king, but was forced to be king. You could throw into that Elizabeth, our own queen, should not be queen. But she is, because of a circumstance that pushed it that way. And in all this, it means one has to step up. But there's also Lionel Logue, who was the speech therapist talking to King George there, who was ridiculed and rejected because he had no academic qualifications. I don't know if you noticed the role that anger played. And this is actually true. That did you notice that when anger came into the equation, King George no longer stammered? And it's often amazing what will happen in the process of anger and the release of anger that we can't accommodate just in normality. And somehow we seem to find something in our anger and in our angst at people that we often don't find outside of that. But the key is to learning to find it outside of that, so we don't have to be angry to feel okay. So one thing is clear, that all our examples are shaped by one thing, and that is adversity. And there's no doubt that the fires of adversity will either melt you or forge you. See, when you're stuck in a fire, it either melts or forges. I would like to think that the fires of our own adversity, because, one thing is absolutely true, that we all have an adversity of some kind in our life, and some things that we wrestle with in our thinking and in our belief. But, the question is the fires of adversity going to melt you or forge you? Because depending on your response, this will depend on your response to the fire. But I'd also like to throw something else in there, and it will depend on whose hands you place yourself in. This is where, for me, the spiritual side of this comes in. It's where the God side comes in. It's where the beyond our own efforts, we place ourselves into the hands of someone, into the hands of capability. One of the last phrases of Jesus when he was dying on the cross was, "Into your hands I commit my spirit." Because those fires of adversity were forging him, so it wasn't just a matter of his response to the fire of crucifixion, but also what played a part to that was whose hands that he placed himself in. I would like to suggest to you that there is a great role for you placing yourself in the hands of the divine, in the hands of God, in all of your response to the fires of adversity. See, the psychology of stepping up is a really interesting one. That's connected in some ways to the elements associated with stepping out. And maybe you can't step up unless you step out, whether that be physical or mental. And there's been a little portion of the Bible that I've been obsessed with for several months. And I think for a reason, and it just roots itself around one verse in the Old Testament, in Genesis chapter 12, where it talks about this patriarch Abraham. And, what the story about that and around that is irrelevant in a sense of what you need to know. It's the phrase that matters. It says, the Lord had said to Abraham, "Leave your country, your people, your father's house, and go to a land that I will show you." Go somewhere, but in order to do that, you're going to have to leave. Now, the reason I've been obsessed with this is because those three things, country, people, father's house, forget his country being what is current day Iraq, which was old-time Babylonian Empire, Ur of the Chaldees. Forget it being a tribe of that part, or his father, I forget his father's name now, it's gone from me. Doesn't matter anyway. But the point is, this reference takes us beyond that. It's not about the characters and the places, it's about the principle that I think is important, because the three things he's called to leave represent three circles or levels of influence in his life. And as they decrease in size, country, people, father's house, they increase in difficulty. Let me put it this way, just very briefly before I finish this little phase of my talk. Country means the widest level of groupthink that you just took on board because that's what you belong to. We all have a kind of a general sense of a groupthink of the widest influence that we have. People is how your tribe thinks and taught you to think. Now, you might say, I've never been religious, I've never been in a denomination, I've ever been... Listen, we're all tribal. We're all tribal, and we all find our tribe, and then we adopt the thought process of that tribe, and it teaches us how to think. So it said you've got to leave the widest influence. Then, if you can do that, you've got to deal with the tribal influence, the things that you hang on to that you think, my tribe, my people, my thinkers do this. And then, of course, Father's house is the most intimate of the relationships that shaped our identity, for this reason, that whatever you interpret Father's house to be, it's the thing from which you draw the greatest level of security and identity. And the truth is, what it's giving us is a security and identity that is not releasing us to be who we were always supposed to be. So sometimes we don't step up even for the very reasons that we feel too secure and too identified in the role that we have adopted and the place that we are existing. So my point being with this, that they represent everything we lean on for our security and identity, and are also the things that shape our concept of God. And you have to leave all three to fully gain the benefit of what lies ahead. So my point to finish this little part of the talk is that for all the influences and impacts and securities and familiarities that we've had, until you step out, you will never step up.
Hi everyone, I'm Elle. I'm usually on a camera or in the booth around about now. This week we're talking about stepping up, and this is how I've been doing that recently. I've been trying to introduce a bit of structure into my life by having a routine. I haven't had one of those in ages. An important part of my routine is to make the conscious effort to have positive and helpful thoughts in my mind every day. And I do this by listening to a motivational video as soon as I wake up. And another thing that I do is make time to read or watch or listen to something that I can learn from. Before that, I wasn't stepping up because I just saw my future as a really scary and overwhelming thing that I wasn't prepared for. And instead of knowing that I could improve over time by working on it, I was paralysed by the massive task ahead of me, and it felt impossible. Our lives are our responsibility, and it is up to us to identify how we can improve and then work on it every single day. We are what we repeatedly do, so what do you want to be? I want to be productive, healthy and happy, and that is what I am working on. Like the guy in the next clip, who could have very easily not done anything and blamed his circumstances, the way he felt, or his physical restrictions, but he didn't. He stepped up. Thank you very much for listening.
So did you notice the two elements I talked to you about were heavily involved in the process of this guy, how you deal with the fire and whose hands you place yourself in. How you deal with the fire and whose hands you place yourself in. The fire will either melt you or the fire will forge you. Everything that we've looked at tonight has had the fires of adversity somewhere. I said I would mention a quote of Clive James, the late broadcaster who died this week. Clive James said, "The problem with facts is they stop us thinking." And you see how we deal with, like that guy, how we deal with the facts. The facts can stop you thinking because you accept the facts. Facts are not there to be accepted. Facts are actually there to be challenged. And when you challenge the facts and it causes you to think, then how you deal with the fire will be completely different. I quote again what Chris read from Walter Frankl and the Viktor Frankl and the concentration camp. It didn't really matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expected from us. The stepping through to a new place. So all of these things driven by crisis and adversity of one kind of another, and we could argue that none of us are free from that. And my sadness is, as I talk to you, is that religion artificially creates the elements that drive the human psyche to step up. And then we step up in the wrong way, and then we get wounded and hurt and bruised. You know, interestingly, that's what advertising does to us. I hope you understand that. Advertising actually creates in all of us crisis and adversity because the motivators are there of guilt, fear, shame, loss, punishment, reward, fear of missing out. These are all the things that we have tried to eradicate from our belief system and the gospel that we preach in this house, to take those things away, because freedom carries its own set of problems with it. And one of the problems of freedom is because we don't feel any guilt, any fear, any shame, any loss, any sense of punishment, any idea that we're not getting the reward or fear of missing out, it can make it so we don't step up beyond where we are because we become familiar and comfortable, and then we never leave Country People Father's house to step into where we should be. There's stuff I could say tonight, but I'm not going to say it. I'll leave that for another time. The great danger in all of us is that the healing and freedom that we enjoy can make us actually step back instead of stepping out and stepping up, and in so doing limit the impact of our own lives that they could have beyond ourselves for the good of all humanity. I want you to realize tonight that in the challenge of all of this, the issue of stepping up is how are you going to deal with the fire, and whose hands are you going to place yourself in? If you will take that step, you will find that you come out of the fire forged into something wonderful, not destroyed by the fire. And you will find that the hands that you place yourself in are hands that can be trusted because they've helped to bring you to that place of wholeness tonight. So I would like you to place yourself in the hands of the divine, in the hands of God, as well as saying, I'm going to step up, because as Elle said wonderfully in our little video, you have to make a decision to take responsibility as to how you respond to the fire of adversity in your life, so that what it will do is make you and not break you. It will forge you and not destroy you, and you'll come out the other end like that guy, because you will be fixed. And that's where I want you to be tonight. So let me just pray a little prayer over you. Father, in Jesus' name, I pray as we are in your presence that we will not only take a responsibility for who we are and for where we are, but we make a commitment tonight that the fires will not destroy us, but the fire will forge us, because we choose to place ourselves in your capable hands, those hands of love, so that things like fear and intimidation and threat and condemnation are not shaping us, but in our freedom we respond, so that we can step out and we can step up and be all that we need to be for ourselves, for our family, for others, and for the wider world at large, so that as you taught us to pray, your kingdom will come in great power, and our lives not only will be touched, but we will be the lives through which others are touched, because we've stepped up and we've stepped out, and we have put our lives into capable hands in our positive response to the fires of those adversities. We receive this today and pray we'll make the difference in Jesus' name.